In 1946, a year after World War II, the U.S. turned its attention to Antarctica. This unclaimed vast stretch of land had untapped potential, and it seemed that the next war would be fought over who owned it. And so, in December 1946, the U.S. sent a huge expedition of 13 ships, 33 planes, and 5,000 men to Antarctica, with the secret mission of scouting out the continent, setting up bases, and claiming Antarctica as their own. One of the first flights to head out was the crew of George I, made up of 9 young men, 2 pilots, radiomen, machinists, a navigator, a photographer, and the ship's captain. The journey was rough, and the extremely cold weather stopped the plane from getting above 300 meters. Frenchie, the pilot, made the call to abandon the mission and turn back. But just as he was about to do this, the plane slammed into a mountain and tore a giant hole in the hull. 5,000 liters of fuel ignited immediately, causing a huge mid-air explosion. The plane came crashing down, scattering debris and its crew all over the ice. Sadly, both Henderson and Lopez died immediately after being thrown through the plane's propellers. The rest of the crew were alive, but Frenchie was badly burned and could barely move. Fred Williams was even worse, with a broken back and several injuries to his face. It seemed almost certain that he would die. Instincts kicked in, and the crew immediately set up shelter in the plane's tunnel section, which had been ripped apart from the rest of the aircraft. They found a parachute and attached it to the end of the tunnel to stop the wind and snow from blowing in. After searching through the debris, they found sleeping bags, tents, and some food rations, mainly consisting of canned meat and soup. Not knowing when or if someone would ever find them, the crew retreated into their shelter to wait out the storm. Williams was too injured to be moved, and so the crew built a shelter around him using a sleeping bag and large pieces of debris. A few hours later, Robbins went out to check on Williams, but he had already drifted off to sleep, taken by the cold Antarctic conditions. The weather around the ship remained terrible for another 3 days, and so no rescue missions could be launched. Back on the crash site, the 6 survivors were slowly freezing to death in a negative 20-degree blizzard. On day 7, the weather around the ship finally cleared, and a rescue plane left Pine Island in search of the crew. Using the last confirmed location of the plane, the rescue team started scanning the ground back and forth in a ladder search pattern. As they reached land, the weather became overcast, and any hopes of seeing the crew had disappeared behind a sea of fog. At this exact moment, Frenchie woke up in a daze and said he heard the sound of a plane in the distance. He hadn't heard anything. He was simply dreaming about being rescued. But as it turned out, the plane had actually passed within 20 kilometers of the crew. Over the next few days, the stormy weather returned once again, and spirits were at an all-time low. The crew were desperate, so they created a large pile of debris that could be set on fire to catch the attention of any nearby plane. Robbins also found some yellow paint and left a note on the wing for their rescuers to see. The crew were running out of time, but their luck was about to change. On the morning of day 13, the good weather finally returned, and the crew were having breakfast, which at this point was just a few slices of apricots. All of a sudden, a low rumble started shaking the ground, getting stronger and stronger until the Pine Island crew had finally found their lost crewmates. The survivors ran out, waving their arms in the air. Their suffering seemed to be finally over. But without landing gear or a safe place to touch down, there was no way for the plane to rescue them. They dropped a note down to the crew that said, "If you can walk to the lake 10 miles north, join hands and form a circle. If you cannot, form a straight line." They immediately formed a circle and began strapping Frenchie to a sled before setting out on their toughest journey yet. The route to the lake was tough. Pulling Frenchie through the chest-high snow took them almost 12 hours. The rescue plane followed them most of the way, dropping occasional supplies to mark the route and snapping this picture along the way. The survivors knew they were getting closer as they could hear the distant sound of a plane. But just as they thought they had made it, they came across a 20-meter high cliff, the final barrier between them and the lake. Amazingly, an almost perfect path just to the left led the way, almost as if it had been placed there to save the crew. After carefully making it down onto the ice shelf, out of the mist came 2 men. After 2 weeks of sheer terror and misery, they were finally reunited with their crew. It was one of the most unbelievable tales of survival and bravery, and all 6 men went on to tell the tale. As for the 3 lost men, they remain buried, perfectly preserved, under 80 years' worth of ice and snow.